Hey, Soulmates, plenty to discuss on this Monday, January 30th. We want to welcome you to Fox Soul's Black Report. I'm Courtney Hicks.
And I'm Nicordelai Corte. We are honored to stand behind this desk each day to take you on a journey across Black America and the stories impacting our people.
We're going to continue to bring you our news, our views, and our voice. Topping our news today, communities across the country are continuing to express their outrage over the death of Tyre Nichols, as a 6th officer has been relieved of his duties in connection to Nichols' death.
Several protests across the nation lasted all weekend following the release of body cam footage by the Memphis Police Department. Blake Hansen has the latest, and we do want to warn you, some parts of the story may be hard to watch.
Damn, I didn't do anything.
Video shows officers yanking Tyree Nichols out of his car during a traffic stop January 7th. While it was reportedly over reckless driving, the Memphis chief said Friday she hasn't been able to substantiate that.
All right, okay.
You hear Nichols telling the officers he is complying.
I'm just trying to go home.
Then it's hard to tell what happens before you see a taser fired as Nichols runs away from the officers. Some of the officers eventually catch up to him in a neighborhood where he's taken down. A camera atop a pole in the area pivots to capture what happens as more officers arrive. Audio from another body camera captures some of what officers were saying to Nichols. And you also hear him call for help. Nichols is later propped up against a squad car.
Shut up, man.
And as they wait for more first responders, the officers stand in a circle, sometimes smiling and joking.
Man, I was hitting him with straight haymakers, dog.
The Memphis chief has said she wants to know what had the officers at such high intensity that during the initial stop, they immediately yanked Nichols out of the car. While standing around, some officers referred back to what Nichols was doing before he was stopped, claiming he drove into oncoming traffic.
He drove into oncoming traffic. So we tried to, I'm talking about he oncoming traffic. Yes, all this traffic. So we tried to get him stopped. He didn't stop. We still trying to get him stopped. Hit the siren. Stop. That man drove around, swerved like he finna hit my car. So then I'm like, damn, man, what are we doing? He pulled up to the red light, stop at the red light, put his turn signal on. So we jump out the car. Went from there.
Nichols was taken to a hospital. He died 3 days later. The 5 officers were fired for violating department policy, then indicted and arrested on murder and other charges. Memphis Police Chief C.J. Davis had warned ahead of time the videos would show more than just police misconduct.
This is not just a professional failing. This is a failing of basic humanity toward another individual.
The Memphis Police Department chose the timing of the video release so people could get home from school and work, with the anticipation it would lead to uproar, not just in Memphis but elsewhere. Dallas Police Chief Eddie Garcia speaking before the video's release.
I have not seen the video yet, but people that I trust that have been in law enforcement for a very long time have. And they say it's terrible.
When the video dropped at 6 o'clock Friday night, protesters were already in the streets around the country. In Memphis, as well as in Dallas, where protesters gathered outside police department headquarters. Protests are expected to continue into the weekend and perhaps beyond. Nichols' family is asking for peace.
We want peace. We do not want any type of uproar. We do not want any type of disturbance. We want peaceful protests.
Blake Hansen, Fox 4 News.
Meanwhile, the Memphis police chief recently disbanded the special crimes unit the officers were a part of as the Nichols family prepares to visit the White House. The name of the group was called the Scorpion Unit and stood for Street Crimes Operation to restore peace in our neighborhoods. According to the department, the division launched in November of 2021 and included 40 officers split into 4 teams who patrolled high crime spots. Now, this comes as Representative Stephen Horsford, chairman of the Congressional Black Caucus, has invited the Nichols family to Washington. He wants to meet with President Biden to discuss swift police reform.
Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated is speaking out since one of the officers responsible for Tyree Nichols' death is a part of their organization. 24-year-old Tadarius Bean was once the president of the controversial Omega Psi Phi's Eta Zeta chapter at the University of Mississippi, known for hazing rituals, including paddling a man's testicles up to 200 times. In a statement, Director Ricky Lewis made no mention to one of the officers being a part of the fraternity, but says that the tragic death of Nichols is unacceptable. He goes on to condemn the actions of the officers and extended sympathies to the family and friends of Nichols. Omega Psi Phi fraternity was founded back in 1911 at Howard University in Washington, D.C., and they advertise itself as the, quote, first international fraternal organization founded on the campus of a historically black college, and believes friendship is essential to the soul. You know, folks were kind of waiting pretty much all weekend long as folks became aware that a couple of those officers were members of that fraternity. I want to say by way of maybe a bracelet or something that was being worn. And I found it to be very interesting, as Ben Crump is also a member of that fraternity, and I do believe he served as their national lawyer, if you will, for a number of years. I don't think he's in that position at this moment, but I was looking to maybe if he would make a statement, or if the fraternity would make a statement as a whole, and they did. I found it very interesting that they did not individually and or address any of those officers affiliated or members of their organization. So I'm sure they're going to continue to address things behind closed doors. Yeah,
and I think it's also important to note sort of why this statement is relevant. In addition to everything that you just laid out, there are a number of incidents that have been documented related to folks being harmed, folks being involved with alleged assaults related to Omega Psi Phi, hazing process and hazing rituals in places like Norfolk, Virginia, and Brooklyn, New York, among others. And I think part of what's caught a lot of people's attention about this is some of the severe incidents, like the paddling that you referenced. How much of that is a part of the culture of at least some of these chapters of Omega Psi Phi, certainly the chapter that one of the officers is a part of.
That may have extended over into.
I am sure that this story is not going anywhere, and folks are going to continue to follow this. While we're talking about the culture of policing, I think there are a lot of people that rightfully are looking at the culture that some of these police officers come out of, including the culture of the fraternity that one of the officers formerly served as president of.
Agree. All right, let's move to North Carolina, where police are being investigated after a disabled man who was complying with commands was shot on his porch of his home. Earlier this month, footage of a disturbing police-involved shooting was publicly released. A home surveillance video showed a husband and his wife sleeping in their mobile home when they were awakened by cops on speakers demanding they come outside. Tied and discombobulated, the North Carolina couple obliged. As the man opened the door with his hands up, within seconds he was shot several times and fell backward onto his floor. Lawmakers from both sides are now sounding the alarm on police reform, as many say the culture of police could now impact anyone.
A mom of 3 is dead after being sucked into the engine of a plane. 34-year-old Courtney Edwards was working as a ramp agent for Piedmont Airlines at Montgomery Regional Airport on New Year's Eve. The NTSB safety report says the plane's engines were left running after it landed due to an aircraft issue. Edwards was reportedly sucked into the engine while placing a safety cone. 2 safety meetings were held to alert the crew before the plane arrived, but other safety protocols were not followed. A GoFundMe has been set up to cover funeral expenses and child care. So far, $100,000 has been raised.
Sad news, comedian Ricky Smiley is mourning the loss of his eldest child, comedian Brandon Smiley. In addition to Ricky, Brandon is also survived by his daughter, Storm, his mom, Brenda, brother Malik, and sisters DeEssence, Taylor, and Aaron. Smiley broke the news on Instagram in a video asking people to pray for his son's mother and siblings. No word on the cause of death. Brandon Smiley was 32 years old, and I saw Ricky kind of make this announcement. I think he went live over the weekend. Again, no word on the cause of death. I remember seeing his son. Ricky had a very successful reality show, and you saw the inner workings and the dynamics of his family. A very honest portrayal, as relationships, as we know in families, go up and down. But in this time, it's just sad to hear situations like this. So we continue to send our love and prayers to the Smiley family and that entire tribe.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So young.
So young.
Yeah.
All righty. A Philadelphia man is facing life in prison now that he has pled guilty to murder. Maurice Lewis has been charged for the death of his mother, stepfather, and his two brothers, 18-year-old Saeed and 7-year-old Les Jr. Police say when officers arrived on scene, they found Lewis naked on the second floor, drinking vodka with a rifle case on the floor. He has now pleaded guilty to 4 counts of third-degree murder. Lewis's family members say he has a long history of mental illness.
In Seattle, 4 white men with white supremacist ties will spend the next 3 years behind bars for a 2018 assault on a black DJ at a bar in a suburb of Linwood. Under a plea agreement, prosecutors and the defense recommended just over 3 years. All but one defendant was sentenced to 3.5 years or more. All 4 were previously convicted of committing a hate crime and making false statements. The man they attacked, Tyrone Smith, said outside the courtroom that his life is forever changed. Smith now struggles with anxiety and uses a cane. The judge also ordered the defendants to pay nearly $171,000 in restitution to cover lost wages and medical bills. He called the attack of a modern-day unhooded KKK.
And former NFL linebacker, FS1 host, and Texas native Emmanuel Acho is under fire for his most recent comments surrounding generational trauma. Now, he recently appeared on Van Lathan's talk show. Take a look.
When white people say, well, racism doesn't exist, I know why they say that, because I've been in them rooms when they saying that. When I kick it with black people and they're like, all white people are racist. I know why you're saying that. All the while, I have the privilege and luxury of not having generational trauma because my parents were born in Nigeria. So man, my method is removing some of the sting because I don't have that sting and trying to deliver a message in a manner that people can receive it.
Okay, Acho received backlash following the interview online, as many thought his comments were elitist to other American blacks and uneducated due to the historic issues Nigerians have had in this country. Acho went on Twitter to defend himself, saying that's not what he meant, instead saying that it was a reach the host was making. Acho hosts the Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man podcast and parlayed that success into a New York Times best-selling book. And Nicola is having a little bit of the Africa heritage along with the African-American experience. Having lived in D.C., that is home to a lot of folks with African origins, if you will. I hear this conversation a lot that they feel that we kind of classify ourselves as second-class citizens, whereas in the various countries of Africa, they are the majority and don't see themselves as such. And so there's kind of a clash maybe with this philosophy, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, I think
I've heard that over the years.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a tension that exists, and as somebody who is, my mom is Black American, my father is Ghanaian. My father grew up in Ghana he was born in Ghana when they were under British rule.
Oh wow.
In fact, Ghana became independent when he was 7 years old, and so there's a Pan-African experience that I think is being missed in this conversation. Sometimes when we talk about generational trauma, we talk about it in a very narrow sort of way, but the legacies of colonialism on the continent have also created traumas and have also created difficulties for folks there. And so I just think it's an opportunity for more learning, an opportunity to facilitate more understanding, to facilitate a stronger connection between Black Americans and Black folks across the diaspora. And so, when I hear comments like that, glass half full, I see it as an opportunity to have a more dynamic conversation, as opposed to having a limited conversation that just provides fodder for social media, but doesn't really, move people towards any greater level of understanding.
I think over the years, the disconnect has eased a bit. And when I say disconnect between Africans and Black Americans, and that sort of kind of rub with maybe the way we see ourselves versus the way they may see themselves, and then come to this country, especially with, the open arms welcome to move back to Africa. There's a big movement of Black Americans moving to Africa, and also the whole Ghana thing to come back and discover your roots. So I think that tension still might be there, and it might be because, as you mentioned, just a disconnect and not a lot of conversation surrounding, culturally how things are a bit different when you talk about countries in Africa and then Black Americans.
And I think certainly related to this national conversation around reparations, there are folks that are a part of certain groups that really are at odds with other folks in terms of, which Black folks should benefit from reparations. So this conversation isn't going anywhere, but I hope that we can use this as an opportunity to facilitate more understanding
to get on code about
less
something.
Less division.
There we go.
Coming up, the hope of adding more color into the classroom, the new push to increase the number of Black male teachers.
Plus, new changes from the FDA to make it easier for you to stay healthy. You're watching FOXSOUL's Black Report.